Alright, finally got a copy of Super Metroid of my very own. I should open her up. Oh man, I've been wanting to get a hold of this for ages, and I don't even regret what I had to do in that dark alley to get it. Well, I regret it a little bit, but worth it. Alright, let's see here, and... wait a second. DJ Boy? Well, me. Well, howdy party people and space cadets, and welcome to the Galactic Happy Hour. I'm your host, Spider Island Slim, and on this week's episode, we will be talking about my top spooky classic video games. And by classic, I basically mean up to the 16-bit generation. We're not going to go past, say, Super Nintendo and Genesis and that sort of thing. Just around 16-bit. The next, I guess, from there would be the top middle school games, if these are old school games. But either way, let's get started. Number 5 on my list is Monster Party from 1989, released by, or made by, Bandai. And let me tell you, this is one that I was very excited about when it was coming out. I mean, just that cover alone just really had the little monster kid in me just psyched. Because there weren't a ton of horror games, and just seeing that one, I mean, it had monster in the title. And then all those stylized versions of great but somewhat obscure monsters. Like there was Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors, the Xenomorph from Aliens, kind of the creature from the Black Lagoon, and most interesting, well, not necessarily most interesting, the most unusual choice was the Watcher. I forget what they were called, but the monster from the movie The Watchers, which is one I really liked as a kid, the second one in particular. But Monster Party basically tells a story of a young man who runs across a gargoyle. I think he was a gargoyle from another planet. Well, anyway, him and this gargoyle, they go on a quest. And first the kid just beats the crap out of monsters with his baseball bat, and then he can actually transform into the gargoyle later in the game. Which, a game where you could transform into a monster and fight monsters, I mean, that was just a good time right there. And I forgot to mention, this was a Nintendo game, 1989 for Nintendo. And this game, I mean, it had some of your usual monsters. There was a Grim Reaper and a giant spider, but then also it was slam full of just unusual things to fight. There was a pair of legs that would just come out of the ground going, do, 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 that you would just have to beat with your baseball bat. There was some dancing zombies that you didn't actually even have to fight. They'd say, watch our dance. And then they'd do this little dance and you watch it and then they went away. Though I remember the first few times I got in there, I was just beating the crap out of those zombies and just could not figure out why they weren't going away. And this one, each level had multiple boss fights. There was kind of a mid-boss and then a main boss. And like I was saying, just the weird bosses. Like one was a giant piece of fried shrimp that bounced around. And there was a lot of other references and things that were cut in the American version. The Japanese version is kind of a different story with more blood and just some unusual stuff. I haven't played this one in ages. I remember being a little tough. I don't know if I ever beat it, but I sure was excited to get that one. And number 4 on the list is, and I'm sure you all guessed that being a list of top spooky classic video games, that there would be a Castlevania entry on the list. Of course there's a Castlevania entry on the list because Castlevania games are excellent. And that is Castlevania 3 from 1990 by Konami on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, I really liked all the Castlevania games on the 8-bit, for the 8-bit generation. But I have to say that Part 2 was actually my favorite. I liked the mood, the atmosphere, the RPG elements, the terrible night to have a curse. I know that game gets a lot of flack these days for some reason, unbeknownst to me, but I just really liked that one. But I'm going to be talking about Part 3 today, because as much as I like Part 2, Part 3 just really kind of defined what Castlevania would and could be from then on out. And that one was so cool too, because Part 3 introduced that branching pathway thing where one path led to one person and one path led to another person. There were just all these unlockable characters like Alucard, Dracula's son, who could turn into a bat and shoot fireballs for some reason. There was Grant, who was a pirate who could like climb on walls and such and had a little dagger. And then there was Sypha, the magic user. I was only able to beat the game with Sypha. I liked using Grant the best, but I just couldn't beat the game with his little knife. I needed Sypha's magic. And any of you who have seen the excellent Netflix series, that's where this is based on, is basically this game. Even though they weirdly continue to leave Grant out. Like each season I expect Grant to pop up and just for some reason he's just not there. And this game was also a prequel to the first one. The main character Trevor, I believe, is Simon's great great grandson or great 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 grandson or great grandson's former nephew's cousin's uncle's roommate or something. But either way, super cool game. And I remember that was a Christmas present that year. I didn't get a ton of games as a kid. And I remember that Christmas was always the time in which I got at least 3 games. Well, not at least. Usually about 3 games was what I would get. And I would remember being so excited every year. And Castlevania 3 was the game that year of 1990 that I just had to have. And sure enough, I got it. And I was so excited. Good times and a great game. Number 3 on the list is another game from 1990. This one by Capcom, and that was Gargoyle's Quest. And it's the only Game Boy game on the list. Interesting, it looks like everything except for the number 1 spot is from 1989 or 90. I guess those were just 2 great years for games. But Gargoyle's Quest was a spin-off of the Ghosts and Goblins, or Ghouls and Ghosts, or however you want to call it, franchise, starring the little red demon guy who would really annoy you in the first level of the game, Firebrand. Though, I didn't see any goblins in any of those Ghosts and Goblins games. I think I find that a little offensive. Yeah, I think I do. Either way, it was a great game, and much, much easier than the Ghosts and Goblins games, and a totally different kind of game. Gargoyle's Quest was it was a bunch of games in one. Like it had RPG elements. You actually walked around like with an overhead view and you go to villages and talk to people. Then there was a world map, but then the actual action stages were side-scrolling platformers. And as you leveled up Firebrand, he could fly further and jump higher and shoot more powerful blast or whatever. It's just a really cool, really fun, unique game. And I probably played it more than any other, well, that's not true. I played Tetris probably more than any other Game Boy game. But next to Tetris, that one I definitely put a ton of hours in. But you know what I always found interesting? Do you? Is on the cover, Firebrand was green. Yet in all the other games, he was red. And then for the sequel on the Super Nintendo, which was, what was the sequel called? Was it Super Gargoyle's Quest or I totally forget. Anyway, the sequel for Gargoyle's Quest on the Super Nintendo, he was red on that cover and red in the game. So I always wondered why he was green on the cover of that video game. But I guess that's just truly one of life's great, great mysteries. And that that game was really, really tough. But I did end up beating it eventually. And I remember it was kind of a technical marvel for the Game Boy, because the last boss was huge. I don't remember if he took up the entire screen, but I remember you really had to scroll up and down and fly up on platforms and stuff just to see all of him. Yeah, it was really, I remember being impressed. And that might have been the first giant boss I'd ever seen on a Game Boy game like that. I know I'd seen giant bosses on some of the Nintendo games like Mega Man, the dragon in the first stage of, well, Mega Man 2, the dragon in the first stage of Wily's Castle, but yeah, this just really just blew me away. And surprisingly, there was a sequel to it on the Nintendo that I didn't even know about. I definitely would have got that, but I did definitely I rented the second, lost train of thought. Yeah, I rented the Super Nintendo one, which his name is still escaping me for some reason. And I remember beating it in one weekend. Well, when I got my Super NES Mini modded last year, not terribly long ago, maybe the year before that, sometime, I could barely make it anywhere. So I guess either I was just better at games as a kid, or I've just gotten bad at games, or the game got harder, or something. Either way, I couldn't come anywhere near close to beating that game that time. But I beat it in a weekend as a kid. Who knows? Maybe we're just better at games as kids. But yeah, this was a really cool game with a lot of different unique elements to it. And on that, we should probably take a commercial break.
ファミリーコンピューターに光線銃登場。コントローラーを電子銃に持ち替えてワイルドガンマン西部のならず者相手にコンマ1秒の腕比べ。次にダックハント。一人はコントローラーでカモを操り、一人はハンター、そして圧巻だけを狙い撃つオーガンズアレイ。どのカセットも同じ電子銃で楽しめるファミリーコンピューター。
And we're back with the horoscope of the week. This week's horoscope goes out to Scorpio. Scorpio, that Martian you think is following you around everywhere you go? Well, you're right. It is a Martian, and he is following you around everywhere you go. But I suggest you talk to him in a diner. Fun will be had. Not by you, though. And number 2 on the list is another game from 1989 by Namco, and that is Splatterhouse for the arcade. Well, it's the only arcade game on the list, and this will be the arcade game version that I'm speaking of. And let me tell you, the little horror nut in me just went cuckoo gaga banana pants for this game. I mean, you were a guy in a hockey mask, splattering monsters and fighting with a gun, all kinds of different weapons, fighting a guy with a sack on his head and chainsaw hands. I mean, you really don't get much more awesomer than that, especially at the time. In my hometown, though, unfortunately, only one place had this game, and it was a movie theater, a small movie theater. And so I would only get to play it when my parents would want to go see a movie at said theater. And I used to always hope that they would want to see something there, and I would want to get there early just so I could play the game or sneak out of the movie. I know a different place did eventually get the game, but they only gave you 4 hearts there, whereas the version of the movie theater you got 6 hearts to play with, which made it significantly easier. But I'll tell you, that 4-heart version was pretty hard. I remember I got all the way up to the cross boss, you know, that flying upside down cross with all the heads around it. I mean, talk about cool. Great game with a lot of atmosphere too. So I guess I should talk about the plot. Basically, a dude and a girl, they go on a picnic. The girl's kidnapped, the guy's killed, but then a big floating hockey mask and thing brings the dude back, and he goes on a splatter quest. And that's really all you need to know. From there, you just go and fight monsters and mess stuff up. Man, that game was just so cool and so much fun. And I gotta say, the remake that came out in the 2000s, I forget which year exactly, 2000-ish, but I thought it was pretty darn good too. And I loved all the H.P. Lovecraft references and elements they added to it, and the sarcastic hockey mask. Or I should say mask, the terror mask, because it wasn't supposed to be a hockey mask. Because actually when they released it for the TurboGrafx 16, or was it the Genesis? Maybe it was both. No, it's TurboGrafx. They turned his mask kind of purpley, so they wouldn't get sued by the Friday the 13th folks. Which, I mean, Friday the 13th folks, they don't own hockey masks. But either way, I thought the purple mask was kind of cool too. And then I think it was the Genesis version where the mask ended up more skull-like. Might have been the Japanese version. One of the versions, the mask ended up kind of skull-looking. And I thought that was even cool. And I just got off what I was talking about. But yeah, the remake for the PlayStation 3, and I think it was on the Xbox as well. It was a lot of fun, and the mask was voice acted really well. I was really hoping for a sequel to that one, but another case of a great game, I guess because it was a modern game or a remake, it got pooed all over, which just really wasn't fair. Now, now, the Splatterhouse, the original one we were talking about, getting back on topic here, I wanted it so bad for home console. I remember I begged for a TurboGrafx 16 just so I could get that game. Never got it, but I did end up playing the kind of watered down Genesis-y version. But finally, after all those years, and another testament to how great the remake was, 1, 2, and 3. The 1 was the only arcade version, but the arcade version of 1 and then the home versions of 2 and 3 were unlockables on that Splatterhouse. So even if you didn't like the remake, which I don't understand why you wouldn't, you could get those games all in one package. So yeah, great, and I finally got to own them. Started playing them, still haven't beaten any of them. Got pretty far in the third one, but nope, not that first one. All right, now it is time for number one, and oh wait, I'm getting a transmission. Oh wow, it's Al from Kaijushorts Thems Fightin Words. Sounds like he wants to stop by and talk about, well, wouldn't you know it, Ghosts and Goblins. Take it away, Al.
This was an arcade game brought out in 1985. It is a run and gun, even though it's kind of medieval fantasy times. So when you're thinking of run and gun, you usually think of Contra kind of games. This is set in a fantasy world. There's demons, zombies, skeletons, devils. You fight satans, and I can't remember what the end boss's name, but I'm pretty sure is the devil. That's right, satans, and you fight the devil. So you can figure. But it was a really cool game. Just because I really like this game, I don't want to give you any impression that I am remotely reasonable at it. I am terrible at this game. I can barely make it past the first level, and I'm definitely not alone there. So a lot of people love this game. It was just re-released on the NES Classic, so it does have a bit of a cult following. It spawned a bunch of sequels. It went across a lot of different consoles, but the thing about it was it's just such a classic example of how hard retro games were. So through the game, 2 hits is just going to kill you at any point. First hit wipes off your armor. Second hit just literally kills you. It's quite hard. The controls, especially on the NES port, are kind of clunky. It takes a little bit of getting used to. As the games progressed, it was... they cleaned up the controls a bit, and it did seem to get easier, but you always had that 2 hits and you're done kind of feel to it. So it was really cool. A lot of it must have made just so much money in the arcades because it just ate all of your money. It's got a really cool soundtrack, but a lot of people don't really remember the soundtrack or talk about it too much, and it's not surprised. I mean, with all the dying that you're doing and how frustrated you might get, it is pretty easy to overlook, but it does have a really nice tune going in the background. If you kind of listen to it on its own, you probably just think, all right, that's the Ghouls and Goblins, Ghosts and Goblins, Ghouls and Ghosts soundtrack. It's quite good. But what do I really like about this game? Possibly the NES and Mega Drive ports. We called them Mega Drives in Australia. We didn't have Genesis, so I've never heard things like Susudio or anything like that. But on both those ports, I just really enjoyed them because I could save my money. You have infinite continues and there's checkpoints. You can always, whenever you die, which is often, if you've hit a checkpoint, you'll just restart at that point. Whereas in the arcade, if you die, that's more money, and it wipes out your your hard-earned pocket money. So I really like these ports. It's a really cool spooky game. I've been just playing it to refresh myself, and I have not made it past the first stage. But it's one of those games that each time you die, you just want to do a little bit better, so you start again. And then next thing you know, you've forgotten to go to work, and it's the weekend, so you just get to play more because you're not at work. So that's all good. Thank you very much, Slim, for letting me on your channel. It's awesome. And happy Halloween, everyone.
Well, thanks, Al, for dropping by and letting us know that exciting, fun facts or whatever it was you had to say. And now it's time for number one on the list, which I know at least 4 of you have been waiting for. And this is the most modern game on this list, and that is Super Metroid from 1994. By Nintendo for the Super Nintendo. And I know you're probably thinking, Slim, Super Metroid? That's an odd, non-traditional choice for a spooky game. Well, I beg to differ. That game is extremely spooky, and one of the spookiest games that I think there is. I mean, it is straight up alien. Kind of just that feeling of isolation and darkness of the first Alien, but with the guns and blowing stuff up of the second Alien. I mean, this is a great, spooky, classic game. I mean, it's got great, spooky, classic ambient music, the just amazing atmosphere. It just kind of drips in atmosphere and ooze, and alien-y goodness. It's definitely my favorite Metroidvania game, and Metroidvanias are one of my favorite style of games anyway. But as this one begins, we have our hero, Samus Aran, whatever it is, and she's back, and she's on another planet searching and blowing up more Metroids and alien-y things. That's really all you need to know. This game is so much fun, and it's got amazing character design to go along with the amazing atmosphere. I mean, I just love Samus's armor, her ship, and then the bad guys, like Kraid, for example, that giant pot-bellied froggy kind of alien thing. Man, I thought he was so cool when I was a kid. And again, another example of giant bosses just being more fun to take down for whatever reason. And if you haven't played this game, you really, really need to in any way you can. And I think it's one of the pack-in games with the Super Nintendo Mini. Even if you don't get a modded version, you should still get one just for this amazing, spooky, alien-y game. And like I said, if you like classic games and you like kind of that alien atmosphere, this is the game to play. Man, I can't go on enough about how much I love Super Metroid and not DJ Boy. Well, that's all the time we have this week. Please like, comment, subscribe, and may your pants always be filled with Kraid.